Hello, everyone, and surprise! It's me, Serene. No, you haven't gotten your schedule or your calendar confused. Emotional Abuse is Real is still on its August hiatus, but I have a special bonus episode for your listening pleasure today. In fact, this is my first ever bonus episode. As you may recall, back in June, I hosted my friend and fellow podcaster, Krista Dykes, on the podcast, where she shared the unvarnished story of her abusive first marriage. This led to an exciting collaboration with Krista on her own podcast, Secret Mom Hacks, and I'm thrilled to share the first of 4 episodes where I am featured as her guest. This episode originally dropped a couple of weeks ago on July 24th, and today I'm honored to share it as a bonus on my own podcast feed. We're talking all things breastfeeding in this episode, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hope you enjoy, and I'll be back in September with all new episodes of Emotional Abuse is Real.
This is Secret Mom Hacks, episode number 77. My name is Krista, and I'm your host. It's July 24th, 2024, and on today's show, I'm thrilled to bring you part 1 of a 4-part series with my friend and fellow podcast host, Serene Leeds. Now, that name may ring a bell if you caught my first ever bonus episodes I released last month. Serene hosts the Emotional Abuse is Real podcast and was so kind to invite me onto her show to share about narcissistic abuse and the betrayal trauma I endured in my first marriage. Today, however, we're turning the tables and Serene is joining us to talk about breastfeeding, the struggles she faced with it, and why it's so dang hard for so many of us. With August being National Breastfeeding Month, I thought this was an important conversation to have right now leading into that month, and I know you're going to find her insights informative and inspiring. But before we get into that, I just want to say thanks for tuning in, Mama. I started this podcast because babies don't come with instructions. As of this recording, I am chasing around a 6-year-old that no amount of Googling, mom groups, or books were able to prepare me for. There's a lot of stuff people don't talk about when it comes to pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy, postpartum, parenthood, and as someone who was previously terrified of all of the above, I'm here to help you pull back the curtain on all of it. And every now and then, it may get a little messy. We may share a little TMI, but that's why you're here, right? My goal is you'll leave every episode feeling refreshed, inspired, and hopeful knowing you're not on this mom journey alone. Now, there's a lot of subject matter to cover when it comes to mom life, and we are covering it all. If you're not following this podcast yet, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you head over to secretmomhacks.com and enter your email address to subscribe for free so you don't miss a single episode. Now, let's dive into my conversation with Serene Leeds, host of Emotional Abuse is Real. Well, Serene, this is a popular topic on Secret Mom Hacks. Can you tell us about the specific challenges you faced while breastfeeding your daughter and how they impacted those early days of motherhood?
Absolutely. It was huge. Like when I was mentioning that I was a zombie, a big part of that was because I was struggling with breastfeeding. And all of the lactation consultants, including my postpartum doulas, were just not the right fit for me. So looking back, my daughter is neurodivergent, and I do have to wonder if that was one of the reasons why breastfeeding was so difficult. She had a very hard time latching and she had trouble staying still. So that's always something I'm always going to wonder about. And so another factor that I believe impacted the breastfeeding struggle was she was very small when she was born. I was told that she was going to be on the smaller side, but I was told like 6 or 7 pounds. I actually delivered her at 4 pounds, 13 ounces, which was at first a little scary because I was like, oh my God, is she going to go to the NICU? But everyone said, nope, she's perfectly healthy. No NICU stay. She's fine. She's just small. And also that had happened because I was induced 4 days early because I had low amniotic fluid. So within minutes of her birth, I was encouraged to do skin to skin, which I did, and to try breastfeeding, but she just would not latch. So the nurses recommended immediately that I try her on formula because they just wanted to make sure that they got some milk into her. But what was really hard was my entire hospital stay was punctuated by futile after futile attempt to nurse my daughter. And it felt like all the lactation consultants in the hospital were unsympathetic, and because they were puzzled by what was going on. And I remember next thing I knew, I was being hooked up to a hospital grade pump, which resulted in absolutely nothing. And then I got sent home, and I was just consistently struggling for her to latch, to produce enough milk. And so formula did come into play very early on because it had to. It had to. But I needed so much loving guidance because that's what you need when you're breastfeeding. And I just got none of that. And I wanted to exclusively breastfeed, and it never really happened. And I just felt like such a failure. And yes, I knew in the back of my mind, fed is best. But I was just like, what is wrong with me? I want to breastfeed my child. I'm her mother. I should be able to nourish her. So it was how we have unexplained infertility. This was a lot of unexplained breastfeeding issues. So I would say like a little over and then of course my daughter got colic. So which I also chalk up to possibly the neurodivergent diagnosis. So we had that. I would say a little over a month after she was born, my mom she brought us to her home and tried to do kind of like a breastfeeding boot camp with us. It was really, really, really special. And we worked really hard to build up my milk supply, and it worked to a point, but at the 2-month checkup, that was the turning point. She was declared failure to thrive, and we had to just put the kibosh on any sort of hope of exclusively breastfeeding. So she was combo fed from there, and then I stopped breastfeeding her at around 7 months. Yeah, and then she was just formula fed because, again, fed is best, and as hard as it was, there were just too many factors impacting the whole breastfeeding situation. It was very hard.
Sure.
Yeah. It was devastating.
It is devastating. And you're thinking, moms have been doing this since we've been on this earth. Moms back then didn't have pumps and formula and all of it. So you take it as such a personal affront that I am not good enough. I completely relate. I've shared my whole breastfeeding experience, so I understand.
I know you did. I know you did. Yeah.
How did you manage that emotional toll of struggling with breastfeeding, and what support systems or resources did you find most helpful during that time?
So I really got to hand it to my mom because, like I said, she started that breastfeeding boot camp for me, and it was really sweet. I am so grateful to her. And she was also researching. She was trying to find me an empathetic lactation consultant. But really, what my mom did, and this was very early on, this was one of the first nights I was back home, and she had seen how hard it was for me to breastfeed. I woke up one morning to an email that completely changed my perspective. Well, I shouldn't say completely, but at least helped to change my perspective because I still struggled and felt like a failure for the next couple of months. So all along, I somehow had it in my head that my mom had exclusively breastfed me and my 2 younger siblings. And I was wrong. My mom emailed me and she's like, I need to tell you my secret. You were formula fed. And this is because I was born in 1977 and breastfeeding had not quite come back into fashion at that point. By the time my siblings were born, breastfeeding was more the norm. So my mom, I don't think ever considered breastfeeding because everyone in her world just bottle fed. So that was her explanation. And so it's something my husband and I bond over now because we were both born in the same year. We're just like, you formula fed? Yeah, me too. Yeah, and we're good. So that really made a huge difference. And also just the fact that by 2016, the Fed is Best movement was really gaining traction. And even though there were just a lot of people who were really pushing breastfeeding, and I felt that way, I knew deep down that Fed is best, nourishment is the best. And that's how I got through it.
Well, what advice do you have for other mothers who might be journeying through a similar experience?
The number one piece of advice that I have is to make sure that you're set up with a therapist before you even give birth. And if you can, try to find a perinatal mental health professional. And I have an article all about that too.
We will include it. Yes.
Yes. I've got so many, I have an article on everything because I had no one to talk to at that point. I absolutely needed a mental health professional at that time. And the other thing is journal about everything that you're going through. I journaled in this special mommy journal that I got from my sister, and it's not all pretty. And I mean, this is just for me. One of the best ways I was able to heal from the whole difficulty breastfeeding period was there was about 10 months after my daughter was born, there was an article that ran in Refinery 29. And it was by a first-time mom who was one half of a well-known media couple. But this woman made the first month of motherhood sound like it was filled with sunshine, rainbows, and roses, and that breastfeeding was the easiest thing in the world. That article made me livid. So I wrote a parody version, and I have that link to share it with everyone. And I talk a lot about how hard breastfeeding is, and I'd be happy to share that with anyone. If anyone feels alone on their breastfeeding journey, I am happy to share that because I did not hold back how hard that was. And this person started an Instagram page for her baby. And I was like,
No. Well, and I think certainly hindsight is always 2020. And so hearing you talk about the postpartum doula and with both of our experiences with breastfeeding, and see, the thing is, I didn't even know a lactation consultant was a thing. I feel like they didn't really talk about breastfeeding or any of that in my birthing classes or anything. I feel like there's so much that just was not covered from out of the gate. And so similarly to interviewing postpartum doulas, as soon as you find out you're pregnant, okay, at the same time, interview lactation consultants too, because it's better to
you have to
have it and not need it. I pray if you're wanting to breastfeed, I pray it goes swimmingly for you. But if it goes the way it went for us and not as easy, then it's better that you've got that person on the line, because I was the one in the hospital asking for referrals and recommendations and calling people and texting them while I'm rocking my little couple days old daughter. And thank goodness I didn't have a breastfeeding boot camp, but I had a lactation consultant come to the house. And I joke sometimes that was the most excited I'd ever been to take my top off in front of somebody, like, here, let's do this.
Oh God. Any shame I had, I remember I would just be like, I don't care. I was just like, whatever, this, I need to work at this. And,
yes, so hard. Well, what message do you hope to convey to moms struggling with breastfeeding, and how can we as a community better support these moms?
Oh, I have a lot to say on this topic. So it's like I said earlier, I think part of the problem is we have these generations old attitudes ingrained into us. So on top of everything else that we as women have on our plates right now it's up to us to break these cycles of archaic attitudes and belief systems. So yay, more for us to do. So always give ourselves grace because like I said, these are age old attitudes. You are not alone. If breastfeeding is not working for you, it's okay. You are not a failure. You can switch to formula, fed is best, all of those platitudes and cliches, but it's true. It's true. You are not a failure. You are a good mom because what you're trying to do is get your baby nourished. And like you said, if you want to breastfeed, get on those lactation consultants immediately. And also the way I was reacting to the birthing class, you know why they didn't teach us about breastfeeding? Because they wanted you to pay for a breastfeeding class. That's why. So I can't say if a breastfeeding class makes a difference because I was like, we're spending so much money. I can't also do this. But I, of course, naively thought, well, what do you need to be taught? You just take off your top and just put the baby there, right? Yeah, wrong. Yeah, completely wrong. So I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, but I do find that when Apple introduced the bottle feeding emoji, it sent such a great message to all moms out there because for a long time it was just breastfeeding. It was just breastfeeding emoji. And I was really happy when I saw that. I think that made a huge difference. And I think that emoji goes a long way toward demonstrating acceptance. The best way we can support these mothers struggling with breastfeeding is doing what we're doing right now, which is talking about how hard it is by sharing our stories, the way you have, the way I am. And if it's something you're comfortable doing, every August is National Breastfeeding Month, with the first week of the month declared International Breastfeeding Week. I try every year to share my story, and it's not to make people who did not struggle to breastfeed feel badly, because it's not about them. It's to raise awareness that this topic should not just be about, let's get more mothers to breastfeed. I think at the same time, we need to talk about how hard it is for many moms. And it's a complex issue, and it needs to be discussed in public forums. All I can say is if you breastfeed without issue, that's awesome. More power to you. But as with so many other topics, mothers should not be suffering in silence about this. So let's keep talking about it.
Well, that's a wrap for today's conversation with Serene. If you enjoyed our chat, make sure you check out her podcast, Emotional Abuse is Real. I'd especially like to direct you to her episodes that dropped on June 5th and June 12th, where I opened up about my emotionally abusive first marriage. You can find links to her show along with her socials in today's show notes at secretmomhacks.com/episode 77. Be on the lookout for future episodes with Serene. I'll be releasing parts 2, 3, and 4 over the next few months with episodes that cover parenting a neurodivergent child, self-care, postpartum doulas, and more. I'm curious what your favorite part of our interview was. I'm hoping you'll walk away inspired with tips either for yourself or that new mom you know. If that's the case, please follow me on your favorite podcast platform if you haven't already. Give me a 5-star rating and leave a review sharing your favorite takeaway so far. You can do all of that by going to ratethispodcast.com/secretmomhacks. Don't forget to stop by secretmomhacks.com where you can find resources and enter your email address so every new show is delivered straight to your inbox. Stay tuned for next week's episode, and until then, you've got this, mama.